A millionaire tries to wake up his 8-month-old baby, who has been suffering from extreme sleepiness for weeks. His fiancée seems to be the only one capable of calming the child, but when she leaves to go to the market, while the millionaire is trying to wake up his son who can't fully wake up, the cleaner's daughter runs desperately to him screaming, "Uncle, your fiancée put this on the baby's pacifier," and shows him the empty bottle. When he reads the label, his heart races and he rushes to the hospital. The golden afternoon light filtered through the luxurious mansion's silk curtains, creating a serene ambiance that sharply contrasted with the escalating anguish in Edward Miller's chest. At 42, the successful entrepreneur had built a financial empire through swift decisions and unshakable trust in the right people. Yet, at that moment, standing before the mahogany crib where his 8-month-old son slept, all his certainty crumbled. Gabriel was sound asleep. But something felt wrong. The baby didn't respond to his father's tender whispers, nor to the gentle touches on his rosy cheeks. Edward leaned over the crib, observing his son's slow, heavy breathing. It was as if the child was immersed in an impossible-to-break slumber. "Gabriel, my little prince," Edward murmured, delicately touching the baby's face. "Daddy's here." No reaction. His blue eyes remained closed, the small hands inert on his chest, which rose and fell at a rhythm that seemed far too slow. Edward felt a chill run down his spine. In recent weeks, he had noticed Gabriel sleeping more than usual, experiencing episodes of drowsiness that lasted for hours. The concern had started subtly. First, it was the prolonged naps during the day, then the difficulty waking for bottle feedings. Elena, his fiancée, always reassured him with sweet smiles and comforting explanations about how every baby had their own sleep rhythm. She seemed to have a special gift with Gabriel, managing to calm him when even Edward couldn't. "Honey, you worry too much," Elena would say, stroking Edward's dark hair. "Gabriel is just a very peaceful baby. That's a blessing, not a problem." Edward wanted to believe her. Elena had arrived in his life like a gift from heaven, precisely when he most needed support after becoming a single father. Gabriel's mother had passed away during childbirth, leaving him completely lost and overwhelmed with responsibilities for which he felt unprepared. Elena appeared through a mutual friend, offering to help with the baby, and quickly became indispensable. She was affectionate, dedicated, and seemed to understand Gabriel in a way Edward even envied. When the baby cried inconsolably, Elena would arrive with her serene presence, and like magic, the child would calm down. When Gabriel refused his bottle, she managed to get him to eat. It was as if a special connection existed between them. But now, observing his son in a state of unnatural drowsiness, Edward couldn't shake a growing unease. Gabriel was breathing, but seemed unreachable, as if an invisible barrier separated him from the outside world. "Milena went to the grocery store," he murmured to himself, checking the time on the gold watch adorning his wrist. "She'll be back in an hour." It was then he heard hurried footsteps in the hallway. Connie, the housekeeper who had worked in the mansion for 3 years, appeared at the bedroom door with a distressed expression. Behind her, her young daughter, Maria, only 7 years old, held something in her trembling hands. "Mr. Miller," Connie said, her voice choked with emotion, "Maria has something important to tell you." The girl, eyes wide with fear and determination, ran to Edward. Her small hands extended an empty bottle, and her words came out in a desperate cry that would echo in the businessman's mind forever. "Uncle Edward, your fiancé put this on the baby's pacifier." Edward took the bottle with trembling hands. When his eyes read the label, his world completely collapsed. There, in clear letters, was written, "Shoe glue toxic. Keep out of reach of children." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the heavy breathing of the baby who couldn't wake up. Edward stood paralyzed for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. holding the empty bottle as his mind tried to process the terrifying reality before him. Shoe glue. The words danced in his vision, each letter a dagger in his desperate father's heart. "Maria," he said, kneeling to be at the girl's height, controlling the tremor in his voice. "Are you sure of what you saw?" The child nodded vigorously, tears welling in her brown eyes. "Yes, Uncle Edward. I saw her taking it out of a bag and putting it on Gabriel's pacifier. She didn't know I was watching from the kitchen door." Connie placed protective hands on her daughter's shoulders. "Mr. Miller, Maria got scared and came to tell me. I told her she must be mistaken, but she insisted so much that we decided to talk to you." Edward quickly stood, walking to the crib where Gabriel remained in his deep, unsettling sleep. With careful movements, he picked the baby up in his arms. The child was warm, breathing, but completely unresponsive to external stimuli. "How long has this been happening, Maria?" Edward asked, trying to remain calm as he gently swayed his son. "A few weeks, Uncle Edward. She always does it when you leave for work. Then, when the baby gets like this," Maria pointed to the sleeping Gabriel, "she gets all worried and says she knows how to take care of him." The puzzle pieces began to form in Edward's mind. The episodes of extreme drowsiness, Elena's apparent magical ability to calm Gabriel, the way she always insisted on being the one to give the baby his pacifier, especially when he was agitated. "Mr. Miller," Connie said hesitantly. What are you going to do?" Edward looked at the clock. Elena would be back from the grocery store in 40 minutes. He needed to act quickly, but also intelligently. Confronting her immediately could be dangerous for Gabriel, especially if she really had been systematically poisoning the child. "Listen closely, both of you," Edward said, his voice firm but low. "You cannot talk about this with anyone else, especially not with Eleanor. Understand?" Both nodded. Maria clinging to her mother's skirt. "Connie, I need you to take Maria home early today. Say she's not feeling well. I don't want either of you here when Elena gets back." Edward took out his wallet and pulled out some bills, handing them to the housekeeper. "Take a cab, and please keep absolute secrecy. I promise I will protect Gabriel and you both." Connie nodded understandingly, but her eyes showed genuine concern. "And you? Will you be okay? And the baby?" "I'm taking Gabriel to the hospital immediately," Edward decided. "I'll say he had a sudden fever and I got scared. I won't mention what we discovered yet." As Connie and Maria prepared to leave, Edward rushed to the bedroom, grabbing Gabriel's diaper bag and some essential items. His hands trembled as he checked for the child's medical documents. The phone rang, making him jump. It was Elena. "Hi, honey," she said with her sweet, familiar voice. "I'm finishing up the groceries. How's my little prince doing?" Edward swallowed hard, forcing normalcy into his trembling voice. "He's sleeping, as always. You don't need to rush." "That's good. I bought those baby food jars he loves. See you in a bit." After he hung up, Edward looked at Gabriel, who continued to sleep deeply in his arms. The irony was cruel. Elena was talking about baby food while possibly having poisoned his son for weeks. He hurried downstairs, finding Connie and Maria already ready to leave. "Uncle Edward," Maria said, running to him one last time, "please don't let her hurt the baby anymore." Edward knelt again, looking into the brave girl's determined eyes. "I promise, Maria. You were very brave to tell me. Now Gabriel will be safe." As the cab pulled away with the two figures who might have saved his son's life, Edward placed Gabriel in his car seat and drove to the hospital, his mind buzzing with terrifying questions about the woman he had invited into his life and who, apparently, had been systematically harming his helpless baby. The private hospital where Edward took Gabriel was known for its discretion and medical excellence. Throughout the drive, he watched his sleeping son in the car seat through the rearview mirror, praying it wasn't too late. Each red light seemed an eternity. Each minute lost a threat to Gabriel's safety. At the pediatric reception, Edward was immediately attended to due to his influence and financial resources that ensured VIP care. The head nurse, recognizing him, arranged an emergency consultation with Dr. Helen Rodriguez, a renowned pediatrician who had cared for Gabriel since birth. "Mr. Miller," the doctor said, entering the room with a worried smile. "What happened?" "Gabriel seems to be in a very deep sleep." Edward hesitated for a moment, weighing his words carefully. He decided to be direct but strategic. "Doctor, I need to be honest with you. I suspect Gabriel may have been accidentally exposed to chemicals at home." Dr. Rodriguez's eyes widened immediately. "What kind of substances?" "Shoe glue," Edward replied, showing the empty bottle Maria had given him. "An employee found this and said it might have come into contact with the baby's items." The doctor carefully picked up Gabriel, examining his pupils, checking reflexes, and monitoring his breathing. The baby continued to be responsive to physical stimuli, but very slowly and lethargically. "Mr. Miller, shoe glue contains chemical solvents that can cause sedation, especially in infants," the doctor explained, checking his vital signs. "The good news is that Gabriel is stable. His breathing is adequate. His heart is beating normally. But he is clearly under the effect of some substance." Edward felt a temporary relief mixed with growing fury. Is his life in danger? Not immediately, but depending on the amount and frequency of exposure, there could be neurological effects. "We'll run some blood tests to identify exactly what's in his system." While awaiting the test results, Edward called Elena, forcing normalcy into his trembling voice. "Elena, honey, I'm at the hospital with Gabriel. He had a sudden fever and I got scared." "My God, Edward, I'm coming right there now," she responded, with apparent concern in her voice. "No, you don't need to. It's just a routine checkup. Dr. Adams said it's normal. I'll be back home in about 2 hours." "Are you sure? I feel responsible when I'm not near him." Eleanor's words took on a sinister meaning in Edward's mind. Responsible. She really did feel responsible, but not in the way she pretended. "I'm sure. See you at home." 40 minutes later, Dr. Rodriguez returned with the results, her expression grave. "Mr. Miller, the tests confirmed the presence of toluene in Gabriel's blood. It's one of the main components of shoe glue. The levels are not lethal, but they are significant enough to cause the sedation we observed." Edward clenched his fists. How long could this have been happening? It's difficult to say precisely, but based on the levels found and considering a baby's metabolism, I'd say Gabriel has been exposed to small amounts repeatedly over several weeks. "Several weeks?" Edward repeated, feeling nauseous. "Doctor, what do I need to do?" "First, we'll keep Gabriel under observation for a few hours to ensure he completely eliminates the substance. Second, we need to identify and eliminate the source of exposure immediately. Third, neurological follow-up will be necessary to check for any developmental damage." The doctor paused, studying Edward's face. "Mr. Miller, I need to ask, is there any possibility this exposure was not accidental?" Edward looked at Gabriel, who was finally beginning to show signs of slowly waking up. "Doctor, can I completely trust your discretion?" "Of course. Absolute medical confidentiality. I suspect Gabriel may be intentionally poisoned by someone very close to our family." Dr. Rodriguez's expression immediately hardened. "Mr. Miller, this is extremely serious. If there's suspicion of deliberate poisoning of a child, we need to take immediate protective measures." Edward nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "What do you recommend?" "First, Gabriel cannot be left alone with the suspected person, not even for a minute. Second, we need to document everything medically. Third, I recommend you consider involving authorities." 2 hours later, Edward left the hospital with Gabriel awake and more responsive, but with a heavy heart from the confirmation of his worst fears. His fiancée, the woman he loved and trusted blindly, had been systematically poisoning his infant son. The terrifying question that hammered in his mind the entire way back was, why? Edward arrived home with Gabriel in his arms, the baby finally more alert after medical treatment. His hands still trembled slightly as he opened the mansion door, mentally preparing for the encounter with Elena. Each step towards the living room felt like a ton. "Edward, how's my little prince?" Elena exclaimed, rushing to meet them with an expression of maternal concern that now sounded fake to Edward's ears. She extended her arms to take Gabriel, but he instinctively recoiled. "He's still a bit sensitive after the checkup," Edward said, holding his son more firmly. "I prefer to keep him with me for now." Eleanor seemed confused for the first time since Edward had known her. "But honey, you know I have a special way with him. Let me help calm him." "No need, Eleanor. The doctor said it's best he rests without much handling today." Edward keenly observed Elena's reaction. She forced a smile, but something in her eyes briefly showed frustration before returning to her usual affectionate expression. "Of course, you're right," she said, stroking Edward's hair. "But tell me, what exactly did the doctor say? You left me so worried." Edward had rehearsed this conversation the entire way from the hospital. "It was just a low fever. Doctor, Adam said it's common in babies this age. He administered some drops, and Gabriel improved quickly." "What a relief," Elena sighed. But Edward noticed she seemed more relieved by his explanation than genuinely by Gabriel's health. "You got scared for nothing, honey. I always said you worry too much." For the rest of the afternoon, Edward observed Elena's every move with a microscopic attention he had never dedicated to anyone. Every affectionate gesture towards Gabriel, every offer to help, every comment about the baby's well-being took on a sinister dimension in his mind. "I'll prepare his afternoon bottle," Elena offered, gracefully rising from the sofa. "No need," Edward quickly replied. "I already prepared one before we left. It's in the fridge." Eleanor stopped mid-motion, an expression of surprise crossing her face. "You prepared it? But honey, you know I always do that. I know exactly the temperature and amount Gabriel likes." "Today I wanted to," Edward said, keeping his voice firm. "You do so much for us, I thought I'd return the favor a little." During the bottle feeding, Eleanor sat next to Edward on the sofa, watching Gabriel drink with apparent tenderness. "He's more awake today," she commented. "Sometimes I worry about these deep sleep episodes he has." Edward almost choked on the blatant hypocrisy. "Episodes? Yes. Haven't you noticed? Sometimes he sleeps so deeply that he seems different. I'm always relieved when I manage to calm him down, and he goes back to normal." Elena's words were like knives in his heart. She was describing exactly the effects of the poisoning she herself caused, portraying herself as the savior of a situation she herself created. "Elena," Edward said carefully, "where do you keep the cleaning supplies and chemicals you use around the house?" "Why the strange question?" she laughed, but Edward detected a subtle tension in her voice. "Just curious. With Gabriel crawling more, I want to make sure everything is out of his reach." "Oh, what a careful father," Elena said, kissing his forehead. "I keep everything in the laundry room cabinet, well locked. You know how careful I am with these things." Edward nodded, but mentally noted the information. He would need to check that cabinet when Elena wasn't watching. That night, during dinner, Elena was particularly attentive, serving him and commenting on how Gabriel seemed brighter that day. Her every word sounded like a disguised confession. "Honey," she said, playing with her fork, "I've been thinking maybe we should consider a night nanny. You work so much, and I worry about you waking up so many times during the night." Edward felt a chill down his spine. A night nanny would mean Elena would have access to Gabriel without witnesses during the day when he was working. "No need," he responded. "I like caring for Gabriel personally. It's my responsibility as a father. But honey, you seem so tired lately, and I feel useless when I can't help properly." Edward looked at Elena, this beautiful and seemingly dedicated woman who had come into his life like a guardian angel, but who in reality was a demon in disguise, willing to poison a helpless baby to achieve her obscure goals. "Elena," he finally said. "You would never be useless to me. You are indispensable." She smiled radiantly, not realizing that Edward had chosen that word with bitterness. Indispensable, exactly as she had planned to become, creating problems only she could solve. Becoming the savior of a child she herself put in danger. That night, Edward stayed awake long after Elena fell asleep, watching her in the dim light and wondering what kind of monster slept beside him. The days that followed were psychological torture for Edward. Every morning, he woke up beside Elena, feigning normalcy, kissing her forehead before going to work. But inside, he felt nauseous, thinking that this same woman had been poisoning his son. The family routine that was once comforting now seemed like a macabre theater, where he played the role of the trusting husband while she portrayed the devoted fiancée. During his hours at the office, Edward could barely concentrate on the business meetings he once mastered. His mind was constantly focused on Gabriel, wondering if Elena was taking advantage of his absence to continue the poisoning. He had instructed Connie to return to work normally, but asked her to observe everything discreetly and report anything suspicious. "Mr. Miller," Connie said on the third day, when he arrived home from work. "Ms. Elena has been acting strangely when you're not here." Edward's heart quickened. "How so?" "She gets very nervous when I get close to Gabriel. Just today, when I went to change his diaper, she came rushing in and said she had already done it. But I knew she hadn't, because the baby clearly needed it." "And Maria, how has she been reacting to Eleanor's presence?" Connie sighed deeply. "The girl gets tense, sir. Yesterday, when Eleanor entered the room where Maria was playing near Gabriel, she immediately came close to me. It's as if she senses danger." Edward nodded gravely. Children had keen instincts for detecting threats that adults often ignored. "Connie, I need to ask you something very important. From today on, when I'm not home, I want you or Maria to always be in the same room as Gabriel. Never leave him alone with Eleanor, not even for a minute. It will be hard to do that without seeming suspicious, sir. Make up excuses. Say Gabriel is in a phase where he needs constant stimulation, that the doctor recommended social interaction. Anything, but don't leave him alone with her." That night, Edward decided to test his suspicions more directly. During dinner, he casually commented, "Elena, do you know where I could find some strong cleaning product? I need to clean some stains on the car." Elena chewed slowly, appearing to consider the question. "What kind of stain, honey?" "Stickers that got stuck on the glass. I heard solvent works well." Eleanor's eyes sparkled for an instant, a flicker Edward wouldn't have noticed before, but which he now observed with microscopic attention. "Would I have some products in the laundry room that might help? I can check tomorrow." "No need to bother. I'll buy some at the store." "But I insist, honey. We save money, and I like to help." During the night, Edward feigned sleep while observing Eleanor through half-closed eyelids. Around 3 in the morning, she silently got out of bed. He waited a few minutes before discreetly following her, keeping to the shadows of the hallway. Elena went directly to Gabriel's room. Edward's heart pounded as he watched her lean over the crib where the baby slept peacefully. She stood there for several minutes, just watching, as if calculating something. Then she walked to the kitchen. Edward positioned himself so he could see her through the half-open door. Eleanor opened a tall cabinet and took out a small bottle, the same type of bottle Maria had shown him. She examined the contents against the moonlight streaming through the window, gently shook the container, and then put it back. Edward silently retreated to the bedroom, reaching the bed before Eleanor returned. She slid under the covers as if nothing had happened, but Edward could feel a different energy emanating from her, a silent satisfaction that filled him with horror. The next day, Edward made a decision that would completely change the course of events. During his lunch break, he went to a specialized security equipment store and bought a covert surveillance camera, practically invisible, with night recording capability. "It's to monitor my baby while I sleep," he explained to the salesperson, who showed him how to install and operate the equipment. That afternoon, while Eleanor was in the garden and Connie distracted Gabriel in the living room, Edward quickly installed the camera at an angle that would capture the entire crib area and the dresser, where the baby's items were kept. At night, Edward tested the app on his phone. The image was clear and the audio sharp. Finally, he would have concrete evidence of what Elena was doing. "You seem anxious today, honey," Elena commented during dinner, stroking his hand. "Everything all right at work?" Edward forced a smile. "Just some important projects. Nothing you need to worry about. You know you can count on me for anything, right? We're family now." Family. The word echoed in Edward's mind like a blasphemy. Elena was talking about family while systematically poisoning its most vulnerable member. But soon, very soon, he would have all the proof he needed. That night, Edward slept with his cell phone under his pillow, awaiting the moment he would finally unmask the monster sleeping beside him. During the first week of surveillance, Edward developed an exhausting monitoring routine that left him mentally drained. He woke up several times during the night to check the real-time recordings, slept poorly, and arrived at work with deep, dark circles under his eyes that Elena attributed to first-time dad stress. "Honey, you need more rest," she would say, massaging his tense shoulders during breakfast. "Gabriel is fine. No need to worry so much." Every comforting word from Elena sounded like a cruel joke to Edward's ears. She was literally telling him not to worry about the son she herself was poisoning. It was on Thursday of that week that Edward made a disturbing observation. Maria, Connie's 7-year-old daughter, had developed a strange behavior whenever Elena approached. The girl, who was once naturally sociable and playful, now visibly recoiled in the presence of Edward's fiancée. "Maria," Edward called softly, finding the girl alone in the kitchen while her mother cleaned the upstairs. "Can you talk to me for a minute?" The child looked around nervously before nodding. Edward knelt to be at her height, noticing how her brown eyes showed a premature maturity that moved him. "Maria, ever since you told me about Elena and Gabriel's pacifier, have you been afraid of her?" The girl bit her lower lip, clearly in internal conflict. Finally, she whispered, "Very afraid, Uncle Edward." "Why, sweetheart?" Because I saw her doing other bad things too." Edward felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of things?" Maria looked around again, making sure no one was nearby. "Uncle Edward, she always puts things on the pacifier and in the bottle when you're not looking. And then, when the baby sleeps a lot, she acts like she's the savior." Edward swallowed hard. The child had described exactly the pattern he suspected. "How many times have you seen this, Maria?" "Many times, Uncle Edward. And yesterday she saw me looking." "What happened?" "She came close to me and whispered, 'Children who make up stories sometimes have accidents.' I got really scared." Edward felt a controlled fury rise in his chest. Elena had threatened a 7-year-old child. "Maria, did you tell your mum about this?" "No." "Uncle Edward, she said if I told anyone, something bad could happen to Mom too." Edward carefully held Maria's small hands. "Listen closely, my brave one. You won't suffer any harm, nor will your mother. I promise you that. But I need you to keep telling me everything you see, okay?" The girl nodded, but Edward could see the genuine fear in her eyes. A 7-year-old child shouldn't carry that kind of terror. That afternoon, when Elena left for her usual errands, Edward took the opportunity to examine Maria's behavior more closely. The girl constantly stayed near Gabriel when he was present, as if taking on the role of a small guardian. "Maria," Edward said, watching Gabriel play on the living room rug, "yesterday you said you saw Elena doing it other times. Can you explain better?" The child sat next to Gabriel, keeping herself between the baby and the front door. "Uncle Edward, she always does it when you leave in the morning. She waits for Mom to go to another floor, and then she takes the little bottles from the cabinet and puts them in Gabriel's things." "Which cabinet?" "The one in the laundry room. But now she has another place too." Edward straightened in the armchair. Another place. In her room. There's a small box under the bed. I saw it when I was helping Mom vacuum. The information was valuable. Edward would have to find a way to examine that hiding spot without raising suspicion. And what else did you notice about her behavior? Maria thought for a moment, playing with a small doll. She gets very happy when Gabriel gets sick. It's strange, because we get sad when someone we like gets sick, don't we? The child's observation was devastatingly accurate. Eleanor showed a sinister satisfaction whenever Gabriel presented the symptoms of poisoning. Maria: there's one more thing I need to know. Have you ever seen Elena doing this to other babies before? The girl shook her head. No, Uncle Edward. But once I heard her talking on the phone with someone. She said, "This time it will work. I learned from past mistakes." Edward felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Elena had done this before. There were other babies, other families she had destroyed. When Elena returned from her errands 2 hours later, Edward keenly observed her interaction with Maria. The girl immediately recoiled, picking up her doll and moving closer to Connie. "How's our little Maria?" Eleanor asked with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Maria mumbled an inaudible reply and ran out of the room. "What a strange girl," Eleanor commented casually. "I think she's jealous of the attention I give to Gabriel." Edward nodded, pretending to agree, but inside he felt a growing revolt. Elena not only poisoned his son, but also terrorized a child who had tried to protect him. That night, after Elena fell asleep, Edward checked the secret camera's recordings. Around 2 a.m. the night before, he had finally captured something. Elena clearly appeared on the video, applying a liquid substance to Gabriel's pacifier, carefully checking if no one was watching. Edward saved the file, his heart pounding. He finally had concrete evidence. But as he watched the recording, a terrible realization formed in his mind. If Elena had threatened Maria, how long would it be until she decided the brave girl knew too much? On Friday morning, a week after Edward had installed the secret camera, Elena announced during breakfast that she needed to travel to visit a sick aunt in another city and would be away for the weekend. "It's a family emergency, honey," she said, delicately touching Edward's hand. "I know it's inconvenient to leave you two alone, but she has no one else." Edward felt a mixture of relief and suspicion. "Of course, Elena, Gabriel and I will be fine. Connie can stay longer if needed." "That's good you understand," Elena sighed. "I hate leaving my little prince, but I'll be back Sunday night." Throughout the morning, Edward watched Elena pack with an efficiency that seemed almost professional. She sorted clothes, organized documents, and made quiet phone calls that he couldn't fully understand. Around noon, after Eleanor left for the airport, Edward made the decision that would change everything. He would thoroughly search her belongings while he had the opportunity. "Connie," he said, "I'll need you and Maria to stay with Gabriel for a few hours. I have important matters to take care of here at home." "Of course, Mr. Miller. We'll take good care of him." Edward started in the bedroom he shared with Eleanor. Methodically, he examined drawers, closets, and corners he had never explored out of respect for her privacy. That's when he remembered Maria's comment about a small box under the bed. Kneeling, Edward searched under the king-size bed until he found a small metal box hidden against the wall. With trembling hands, he pulled it out and discovered it was locked with a simple padlock. Using a tool from his private workshop, Edward forced the padlock open. What he found inside made his blood run cold. There were dozens of small bottles containing different chemical substances, shoe glue, solvents, mild sedatives, and other substances he didn't recognize. Even more terrifying were the detailed notebooks documenting dosages, times, and observed effects. A scientific record of Gabriel's systematic poisoning. But what truly made Edward nauseous were the photographs. Images of Gabriel in different states of sedation, with dates and annotations beside them. "Increased dose, longer effect," read one. "Need to adjust to avoid suspicion," on another. At the bottom of the box, Edward found something that completely changed his understanding of the situation, an envelope containing newspaper clippings and documents about other wealthy men who had lost young children in mysterious circumstances. In each case, there was a close woman who had become indispensable during the crisis and subsequently inherited considerable fortunes. Edward recognized Elena in one of the old photographs, but with a different name, Helen Cross. In another, she appeared as Elisa Sands, always the same face, always the same pattern, always destroyed families left behind. A particular document made Edward almost faint. The will Elena had subtly suggested he make the previous month, just as a precaution for a responsible father, in which she appeared as Gabriel's guardian and principal beneficiary in case of both their deaths. His hands trembled violently as he photographed each document with his cell phone. Elena wasn't just a woman who had fallen in love and developed psychological problems. She was a systematic predator who had turned the murder of innocent children into a lucrative business. The phone rang, interrupting his discoveries. It was Elena. "Hi, honey, I arrived safely. How are my two men?" Edward forced normalcy into his voice, but felt bile rising in his throat. "We're good. Gabriel is playing with Maria." "That's great. You know, I've been thinking, when I get back, how about we set our wedding date? I think we've waited long enough." Elena's words took on a sinister meaning in light of his discoveries. She wanted to accelerate the timeline because she felt she was losing control of the situation. "Of course, Elena, we can talk when you get back." "Perfect. And Edward, make sure Gabriel doesn't go too long without his pacifier. You know how agitated he gets without it." After she hung up, Edward looked again at the bottles of poison and the detailed records of his son's suffering. Elena had just instructed him, by phone, to continue poisoning Gabriel in her absence. At that moment, Edward made an irreversible decision. He wouldn't just confront Elena when she returned, he would completely destroy her, using the same weapons she had used against innocent families: evidence, patience, and calculated precision. Picking up his phone, Edward made 2 calls. The first was to an attorney specializing in child endangerment cases. The second was to a private investigator he had used in previous business dealings. "I need you both to clear all your weekend commitments," he told them. "We have an attempted murder of a baby to solve, and only 48 hours to build a bulletproof case." While awaiting the arrival of his allies, Edward looked at the box of horrors Elena had hidden so carefully. She had underestimated 2 things: the intuition of a brave 7-year-old child and the relentless determination of a father who discovered someone was trying to murder his son. From that moment on, the hunt had begun. And this time, Edward would be the predator. Dr. Robert Castillo, the criminal defense attorney, arrived at the mansion 2 hours after Edward's call, accompanied by Marcus Riley, the private investigator. Both were experienced men who had worked on complex cases involving crimes against children, but even they were visibly shaken as they examined the arsenal of evidence Edward had discovered. "Edward," Dr. Castillo said, flipping through Elena's detailed notebooks, "this is one of the most disturbing cases I've ever seen. This woman isn't just a criminal. She's a systematic predator who has turned child murder into a calculated method of enrichment." Marcus was photographing each bottle of poison with professional equipment. "Look at the organization," he murmured, impressed by the sinister methodology. Each substance labeled, dosages calculated with scientific precision. She must have studied pharmacology or chemistry. Edward, who had spent the entire afternoon reviewing the documents, pointed to a specific folder. "I found evidence of at least 7 previous cases, always the same pattern. She approaches wealthy men with young children, creates emergency situations by poisoning the children, becomes indispensable as a caregiver, marries quickly, and then the children die in convenient accidents." Dr. Castillo raised his head from the documents, his expression grave. "Edward, You understand we're dealing with a serial killer, don't you? The level of premeditation and the repetition of the pattern constitute multiple homicides. Why hasn't she killed Gabriel yet? Edward asked, his voice choked with emotion. Because you're wealthier than her previous targets, Marcus pragmatically responded. From the documents, she's planning a more elaborate scheme. Marry first, secure legal rights over Gabriel, and then eliminate both of you to inherit everything. Edward felt a chill. Both. Dr. Castillo showed a specific page from Elena's notebooks. Look here, she documented not only Gabriel's poisoning but also experiments with substances that could simulate heart attacks in adults. Edward, she was planning to kill you too. Over the next few hours, the three men worked meticulously to build a solid legal case. Marcus used his contacts to trace the false documents Elena had used in previous relationships, uncovering a complex network of fake identities that extended across several states. Her real name is Amanda Stone, Marcus informed Edward, showing him an original birth certificate. She's 34, not 28, as she told you, and she has a psychiatric history that includes hospitalization for sociopathic tendencies. Dr. Castillo was preparing the legal documentation. Edward, we'll need to involve the authorities immediately, but we have to be strategic. If she suspects we've discovered everything, she might flee or, worse yet, try to accelerate her plans. What do you suggest? We let her return from her trip as planned. You act normally until Monday. In the meantime, I'll coordinate with the district attorney's office, and Marcus will continue collecting evidence from the previous cases. On Monday morning, when she's relaxed, we make the arrest. Edward nodded, but felt a growing anxiety. What if she tries something against Gabriel during that time? That's why you won't leave her alone with him for a second, Marcus said. Connie and Maria can be additional witnesses. In fact, we need to protect that girl too. She's a crucial witness. That night, Edward called Connie for a serious talk, explaining the entire situation without hiding details. My goodness gracious, the housekeeper sighed, putting her hands to her face. I knew there was something wrong with that woman. Maria always got scared around her. Connie, I need to ask you and Maria to stay here at the mansion throughout the weekend and until Monday until we resolve this. It's for your safety too. Of course, Mr. Miller. Maria will be happy. She always worried about Gabriel. During Sunday, Edward received 3 calls from Eleanor. In each of them, she sounded more eager to return, making comments about how she was worried about Gabriel and missed her family. Honey, I changed my flight. I'm coming back tonight instead of Monday morning, she said in the last call. I miss you both terribly. Edward felt his heart race. The timeline had changed. Of course, Elena. We'll be waiting. Immediately after hanging up, he called Dr. Castillo and Marcus. She's coming back today. We need to speed everything up. Calm down, Edward, the attorney said. I've already coordinated with the authorities. They'll be on standby. You just need to act normally until tomorrow morning. That evening, when Elena arrived from her trip, Edward greeted her with a hug that cost him all his willpower. She was radiant, loaded with gifts, and seemingly eager to resume her family routine. How's my little prince? She asked, rushing to Gabriel, who was playing on the living room rug. Edward watched attentively as Elena picked Gabriel up. The baby, who had spent 2 days without being poisoned, was noticeably more alert and responsive. Elena immediately noticed. Gabriel is different, she commented, with a tone Edward now recognized as disguised disappointment. More restless. I think he missed you, Edward lied. Of course, Eleanor smiled. But Edward detected a coldness in her eyes he had never noticed before. Well, tomorrow we'll get back to our normal routine, won't we, my love? Normal routine. Edward knew exactly what that meant. Tomorrow, Elena planned to start poisoning Gabriel again, but tomorrow, instead of implementing her diabolical plans, Elena would find a surprise that would forever destroy her career as a child killer. Monday morning's early hours were the longest of Edward's life. He stayed awake, pretending to sleep beside Elena, observing her every movement through half-closed eyelids. Around 3 in the morning, as had become her pattern, she silently got out of bed. Edward discreetly activated the camera app on his cell phone, recording in real time as Elena performed her macabre routine. This time, however, he was documenting not just for evidence, but to capture the last moments of freedom for a killer who didn't know her world was about to collapse. Elena went first to Gabriel's room, watching the baby sleep peacefully. Then she walked to the kitchen where, with precise and calculated movements, she prepared a new dose of her toxic mixture. Edward watched with disgusted fascination as she tested the liquid's consistency against the light, like a perverse chemist perfecting her deadly formula. What Elena didn't know was that the house was silently surrounded. In the shadows of the garden, 2 detectives specializing in child endangerment cases awaited Dr. Castillo's signal to act. Marcus was positioned in a nearby vehicle, monitoring all communications. And upstairs, Connie and Maria slept in the guest bedroom, ready to serve as witnesses when needed. When Elena returned to bed at 4 in the morning, Edward forced himself to breathe regularly, simulating deep sleep. She slid under the covers and, for the first time in weeks, Edward detected a genuine satisfaction emanating from her. Elena was happy because she had resumed her poisoning schedule. At 7 in the morning, Edward got up and followed his usual morning routine. He showered, dressed for work, and went down for breakfast as if it were an ordinary day. Elena was in the kitchen, making coffee and humming softly, a behavior Edward now recognized as post-poisoning euphoria. "Good morning, honey," she said, kissing his forehead. "Sleep well?" "Slept like a log," Edward lied. "And you?" "Wonderfully. It's so good to be back home." During breakfast, Edward watched Elena interact with Gabriel in a way that now caused him nausea. She spoke to the baby in a sweet, maternal tone, knowing perfectly well that she had just administered poison that would leave him sedated and vulnerable in the coming hours. "Edward," Elena said casually, stirring sugar into her coffee, "I have a surprise for you." Edward felt his heart race. "What kind of surprise?" "I scheduled a meeting with an attorney for this afternoon. I thought we could finalize our will and some adoption documents to formalize my position as Gabriel's mother." Eleanor's audacity was impressive. She was literally asking Edward to sign the documents that would facilitate her inheritance after murdering them. "How efficient," Edward replied, forcing a smile. "But I need to check my schedule. Can I call later to confirm?" "Of course, honey. But don't take too long. The sooner we formalize our family, the better." Family. The word echoed in Edward's mind like an insult. Elena spoke of formalizing the family she was systematically destroying. At 8:30, Edward kissed Eleanor on the forehead and headed for the door as if going to work. "I'll be back for lunch," he said. "Take good care of our little prince." "Always do," Eleanor replied with a smile that Edward now saw as pure venom. Instead of going to the office, Edward parked his car 2 blocks away and called Dr. Castillo. "It's time." "Perfect. We're all in position. In 15 minutes, Eleanor will receive the visit that will change her life forever." Edward returned to the mansion through the back gate, discreetly entering through the kitchen where he found Connie preparing lunch with Maria helping beside her. "How is she behaving?" Edward asked quietly. "Strange, Mr. Miller," Connie whispered. "Right after you left, she went to Gabriel's room with the pacifier. The baby was awake and playing, but after she gave him the pacifier, he got drowsy again." Maria pulled Edward's shirt. "Uncle Edward, I saw her putting the bad liquid on the pacifier again. She didn't stop doing it." Edward knelt beside Maria. "My brave girl, in a few minutes, important people will arrive here to take Elena away. You won't have to be afraid of her ever again." Maria's eyes lit up. "Really? Uncle Edward? Really? And after everything is over, you and your mom will live here with us forever, like our real family." At 9 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Edward heard Elena walking to the front door, probably expecting to see the mailman or a delivery person. Instead, she opened the door to Dr. Castillo, Marcus Riley, and 2 special agents. "Elena Santos," one of the agents asked, showing a badge. "Yes. Is there a problem? Your real name is Amanda Stone, and you are under arrest for attempted murder, child endangerment, fraud, and multiple homicides." From upstairs, Edward heard Amanda's cry of surprise and indignation. "This is a mistake. I would never—" "Ma'am, we have physical evidence, video recordings, and witnesses. Please extend your hands for the handcuffs." Edward slowly descended the stairs, arriving in the living room just as Amanda, was being handcuffed. When she saw him, the mask of sweetness finally fell completely from her face. "You!" she screamed, genuine fury gleaming in her eyes. "You betrayed me after everything I did for you and Gabriel." Edward looked at the woman who had almost destroyed his family, feeling a mixture of revulsion and pity. "Amanda, the only thing you did was try to murder my son. He'd be better off without you," she yelled as she was led out of the house. "You don't know what you're giving up." And so, as Amanda Stone, was taken away to face justice for her horrific crimes, Edward finally breathed freely for the first time in weeks. In the days that followed Amanda's arrest, Edward found that the feeling of relief he expected was mixed with a deep disturbance he couldn't shake. The house, once a setting of manipulation and silent terror, now seemed to echo with memories that haunted him during the day and kept him awake at night. Gabriel, free from the effects of the toxic substances, showed a remarkable transformation. The baby was more alert, more responsive, and demonstrated a development that had been artificially suppressed for weeks. Every smile, every gurgle, every moment of play Gabriel offered was simultaneously a joy and a painful reminder of what Amanda had stolen from him. "Mr. Miller," Connie said on the Thursday following the arrest, as they watched Gabriel playing energetically on the rug, "the boy is completely different. It's as if he woke up from a nightmare." Edward nodded, but his expression remained somber. "Connie, I can't stop thinking, if Maria hadn't been brave enough to warn me—" "But she was, sir. And you believed her. That's what matters." During that week, Dr. Castillo kept Edward informed about the case developments. The investigations revealed even more disturbing details about Amanda Stone's past. "Edward," the attorney said during a call, "we discovered that Amanda has a history dating back at least 10 years. We've identified 9 different cases where she used fake identities to approach wealthy men with young children." Edward felt his stomach clench. 9 cases. "Unfortunately, not all had happy endings like yours. We found evidence of at least 4 children who died under suspicious circumstances while under Amanda's care." The revelation hit Edward like a punch. 4 innocent infants had lost their lives to Amanda's diabolical schemes. Gabriel had narrowly escaped. How did she manage to avoid getting caught for so long? She was meticulous, Edward. She moved states, altered her appearance, used sophisticated fake documents, and she chose emotionally vulnerable victims, recently widowed men, single fathers, people who were desperate for help and support. Dr. Castillo paused before continuing. "There's something else you need to know." Amanda confessed during interrogation, but not out of remorse. She's trying to negotiate a reduced sentence by providing information about other cases. What did she say? That Gabriel was meant to be the last job. She had planned to retire after inheriting your fortune. According to her, you were the perfect target, rich, vulnerable, too trusting, and with a baby completely dependent on caregivers. Edward closed his eyes, feeling a wave of nausea. Did she say how much time Gabriel had left in her plan? 3 months, Edward. She was planning an accident during the honeymoon you would take after the wedding. That night, Edward sat in Gabriel's room, watching his son sleep peacefully. Dr. Castillo's words echoed in his mind. 3 months. Gabriel would have lived only 3 additional months if Amanda's plan had worked. Maria appeared at the bedroom door, holding her favorite doll. "Uncle Edward, can I stay here with you for a bit?" Edward smiled, making space on the armchair for the girl to sit beside him. "Of course, my brave one. Can't you sleep?" "Sometimes I still have nightmares about the bad lady," Maria admitted, snuggling against Edward's arm. "But then I remember she can't hurt Gabriel anymore, and I feel better." Edward hugged Maria tenderly. This 7-year-old girl had shown more courage and protective instinct than many adults would in the same situation. "Maria, I want you to know something very important. You saved Gabriel's life. If you hadn't been brave enough to tell me what you saw, I might have lost my son forever. I couldn't let her hurt a baby," Maria said simply. "Babies can't defend themselves." The purity and wisdom in the child's words deeply touched Edward's heart. A 7-year-old girl had instinctively understood something that he, with all his life experience and resources, had missed, that sometimes the most dangerous threats come from the people we trust the most. Uncle Edward," Maria whispered, "do you think there are other children being hurt by people like her?" The question made Edward reflect deeply. Dr. Castillo had mentioned that Amanda would provide information about other cases, but how many other Amandas existed in the world? How many other babies were being systematically poisoned by people who pretended to love them? "Perhaps, Maria, but you know what I learned from you. That brave people like you can make a difference. And now that the bad lady is arrested, she can't hurt any more children." Maria nodded contentedly and fell asleep, leaning against Edward's arm. He remained there for hours, alternating his gaze between Gabriel sleeping peacefully in his crib and Maria resting confidently beside him. 2 children, one who nearly lost his life because of a killer's greed, and another who risked everything to save a baby who wasn't even her family. That night, Edward understood that he had learned one of the most important lessons of his life, that true family is not defined by blood or legal documents, but by the willingness to protect each other, even when it requires extraordinary courage from small, brave hearts. 2 weeks after Amanda's arrest, Edward made a decision that would permanently change the dynamic of his home. He formally offered Connie and Maria not just permanent jobs, but a real home in the mansion that had once been the scene of so much suffering. "Connie," he said one sunny morning, as they watched Gabriel and Maria play together in the garden, "I'd like to make an official proposal." The woman, who had become much more than an employee in recent weeks, looked at him with respectful curiosity. "I want you both to move into the mansion permanently. There are enough rooms. And Joelle, after everything we've been through, I can't imagine our family without you two." Connie's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Miller, are you sure? You are the people who saved my son," Edward gently interrupted. "Maria had the courage I didn't. You had the wisdom to believe your daughter when others might have dismissed her warnings. You're not just employees, you're family." That same day, Edward hired a pediatric trauma specialist to monitor Gabriel's development after months of systematic poisoning. Dr. Patricia Reed, a renowned professional, carefully examined the baby and brought comforting news. "Mr. Miller," she said after a full evaluation, "Gabriel is a resilient baby. Although he was exposed to toxic substances for several weeks, his neurological development appears to be recovering completely, little by little. He's reaching milestones that had been suppressed." Edward felt a wave of deep relief. "There won't be any permanent effects?" "It's too early to say with absolute certainty, but all indicators are positive. Gabriel is more alert, more responsive, and demonstrating natural curiosity that is characteristic of healthy babies his age." Meanwhile, Maria had adapted to the new life with a naturalness that surprised Edward. The girl, who had previously shown visible fear whenever Amanda approached, now ran freely through the mansion, played in the gardens, and had taken on the role of a protective older sister figure to Gabriel. "Uncle Edward," she said one afternoon, while helping to give Gabriel his bottle, "can I ask a question?" "Of course, my brave one. What do you want to know?" "Why do adults sometimes hurt children?" The question hit Edward like a lightning bolt. It was a profound question coming from a child's mind that had witnessed malice firsthand. "Maria," he answered carefully, "some people get very sick in their heart and mind. They start to see other people not as human beings who deserve love, but as objects they can use to get what they want. Like the bad lady did with Gabriel." Exactly. She saw Gabriel not as an innocent baby who deserved protection, but as a means to get money. Maria shook her head gravely, showing a comprehension that bordered on adult maturity. "That's sad. I could never hurt a baby. And that's exactly why you're special, Maria. You have a pure heart that recognizes protecting the helpless is always the right thing to do." During those weeks of recovery, Edward also had to deal with his own emotional wounds. Dr. Helen Rodriguez, Gabriel's pediatrician, recommended he seek counseling to process the trauma of discovering he had blindly trusted a killer. "And Edward," the psychologist said during one of the sessions, "you're suffering from a specific type of trauma, the absolute betrayal of trust. It's normal to feel guilt, question your instincts, and have difficulty trusting again." "I feel like an idiot," Edward admitted, "like a father who failed to protect his own son." "But you didn't fail. When presented with evidence, you acted immediately. You listened to a 7-year-old child when you could have ignored her warnings. You investigated, collected evidence, and saved Gabriel before it was too late." The professional's words helped Edward understand that his response to the crisis had been appropriate, even if he hadn't recognized the danger initially. A month after Amanda's arrest, Edward received a call from Dr. Castillo with updates on the case. "Edward, Amanda's trial is progressing quickly. She decided to plead guilty in exchange for life without parole, avoiding the death penalty and the other cases. Thanks to the information she provided, we were able to definitively connect her to 6 child murders in different states. The victims' families will finally have closure." Edward closed his eyes, thinking of the families who weren't as lucky as he was. "Dr. Castillo, I want to do something for the families of the children Amanda murdered. They must be facing legal expenses." "That would be very generous, Edward." "It's not generosity, it's responsibility. If it weren't for Maria's courage, Gabriel would be Amanda's next victim." That night, Edward sat in the mansion's garden, watching Maria teach Gabriel to clap his hands while Connie prepared dinner in the kitchen. The air was fragrant with flowers Amanda had never bothered to admire, because she was too busy planning to destroy the family she pretended to love. For the first time in months, Edward felt a genuine peace. His family had grown unexpectedly, but had become stronger and more united than he had ever imagined possible. 6 weeks after the nightmare ended, Edward organized a special celebration that would mark a milestone in his newly reunited family's life. He had spent days meticulously planning every detail of what he called the Party of Courage, a tribute to Maria's bravery that had saved Gabriel's life. The mansion was decorated with colorful balloons and cheerful banners that completely transformed the atmosphere of a place that had previously breathed tension. Edward had hired a photographer to document the day, knowing that those moments would be precious for the entire family for the rest of their lives. "Maria," Edward said when the girl came downstairs wearing a new dress he had bought especially for the occasion, "today is your special day." Maria's eyes sparkled with curiosity and joy. "My day, Uncle Edward." "Yes, because today we are celebrating the bravest girl I know." In the main living area, Edward had set up a presentation with photographs and documents that told the entire story. From the terrifying moment Maria ran to him with the shoe glue bottle, to Amanda's arrest and Gabriel's full recovery. Dr. Castillo and Marcus, the investigator, were present as special guests. Connie, wearing an elegant dress Edward had insisted on buying for her, watched with tears of pride as her daughter received the recognition she deserved. "Maria," Dr. Castillo said, kneeling to be at the girl's height, "do you know you're a real hero? Because of your courage, Gabriel is alive, and other children are safe now that Amanda is in prison." The girl blushed, not yet fully aware of the magnitude of her actions. "I just didn't want anyone to hurt the baby." "And it was precisely that purity of heart that made all the difference," Marcus said, showing Maria a special medal he had commissioned. "This medal is for brave children who protect others." When Maria read the inscription, "For Maria, whose valiant heart saved a life," she began to cry with emotion, immediately comforted by her mother and Edward. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. Edward had used his contacts to arrange something that would permanently change Maria and Connie's lives. "Maria," he said, taking a special envelope, "in addition to living with us forever, you will study at the best private school in the city. And when you grow up, if you wish, you can study medicine, law, or any profession you dream of, all expenses paid, because heroines deserve the best opportunities." Connie began to weep openly. "Mr. Miller, this is too much." "It's not too much, Connie. It's the least I can do for the family who saved my son." During the special lunch, Gabriel, now 9 months old and visibly more developed, happily babbled in his high chair, as if understanding that this was a day of celebration. The baby had reached developmental milestones that had been suppressed during the months of poisoning, and now demonstrated the vibrant personality Amanda had tried to suppress. "Uncle Edward," Maria asked while playing with Gabriel, "do you think Gabriel will remember everything that happened?" Edward considered the question carefully. "He was too young to form clear memories, Maria, but you know what I believe? I think he will always know, even without remembering the details, that he was loved and protected by people who cared about him, and that he had a brave sister who didn't let anything bad happen to him," Connie added, hugging Maria with pride. At the end of the afternoon, when the guests had left and the house returned to tranquility, Edward sat in the garden with Gabriel in his lap, watching Maria and Connie tend to the flowers they had planted together. The scene was one of familiar normalcy that he had thought he would lose forever. Dr. Patricia Reed, the pediatric specialist, had confirmed in the previous week's consultation that Gabriel showed no residual signs of the poisoning effects. The baby was healthy, happy, and developing normally. "Gabriel," Edward whispered to his son, "you'll never know how close you came to losing us. But now you have a family that will always protect you. A grandmother figure who loves you as if you were her own flesh and blood, and a sister who risked everything to save you." As the sun set over the mansion, painting the sky golden, Edward reflected on how his definition of family had completely transformed. Before, family was blood and legal documents. Now, family was the people willing to face dangers to protect each other. Maria ran to him, holding a flower she had picked from the garden. "For you, Uncle Edward. Because you believed in me when I was scared." Edward accepted the simple flower, which represented much more than a gift. It represented restored trust, unconditional love, and the promise that his reconstituted family would face any future challenge together. That night, for the first time in months, Edward slept deeply, knowing that Gabriel was safe and that Maria would never again need to be afraid. The mansion that had been the scene of silent terror now breathed love, protection, and the invincible strength of a family united by overcome adversity. 3 months after Amanda's arrest, Edward received an unexpected call from Dr. Castillo that would bring final closure to one of the darkest chapters of his life. "Edward, Amanda asked to speak with you. It's unusual, but she claims to have important information that she'll only share in person." Edward felt a chill run down his spine. The last thing he wanted was to see the woman who had tried to murder his son. "Dr. Castillo, why would I want to speak with her?" She said she has information about other cases that can help families who still don't know the truth about their children's deaths. And She specifically mentioned she has something important to tell you about Gabriel's past. The mention of Gabriel made Edward hesitate. What kind of information? She didn't give her lawyer details, only that you deserve to know the whole truth about what she discovered regarding the child's past. After much reflection and conversation with Connie and Maria, Edward decided to accept the meeting. The meeting was set to take place at the prison, with Dr. Castillo present as a witness and for legal protection. On the appointed day, Edward faced the prison system for the first time in his life. The cold, austere environment sharply contrasted with the luxury of his mansion, serving as a constant reminder of where Amanda's choices had led her. When Amanda entered the visitor's room, Edward was shocked by her transformation. The elegant, manipulative woman he had known had been replaced by someone visibly worn down, with deep, dark circles under her eyes and hair lacking the meticulous care that once characterized her appearance. "Edward," she said, sitting across the metal table, her cuffed hands resting on the cold surface. "Thank you for coming. Just say what you have to say, Amanda. I don't have time for games." Amanda sighed deeply, and for the first time since Edward had known her, she seemed genuinely vulnerable. "There are things about Gabriel you never knew, things I discovered during my research into your family before I approached you." Edward felt his heart quicken. "What kind of things?" "Gabriel's mother, Laura, she didn't just die of childbirth complications." Edward's world seemed to stop. Laura had died of postpartum hemorrhage, according to the doctors. "What are you talking about?" "Laura discovered she was being poisoned during her pregnancy. That's why Gabriel was born prematurely. She died trying to protect her son from someone who was trying to kill them." Edward was in shock. Who? Who was poisoning Laura?" "Her sister, Patricia." Laura had discovered that Patricia was stealing money from the family, and when she threatened to expose her, Patricia started adding substances to Laura's food, hoping to cause a miscarriage that would seem natural. Dr. Castillo intervened. "Amanda, do you have proof of this accusation?" Amanda nodded. "Patricia sought me out 6 months after Laura's death. She knew of my reputation. Through mutual acquaintances, she wanted to hire my services to finish the job she couldn't complete." Edward felt nauseous. "Are you saying Patricia wanted to hire you to kill Gabriel?" "Yes. She believed that with Gabriel out of the way, she would inherit all the fortune Edward would allocate to his son. I said I'd take the job, but I actually planned to eliminate Patricia and keep you and Gabriel for myself." The revelation was devastating. Edward understood that Gabriel had been in danger even before he was born, and that Amanda, ironically, had temporarily protected his son by taking on Patricia's job, only to later betray her. What happened to Patricia? "She died in a car accident. 2 weeks before I officially approached you, I made sure she would never threaten Gabriel again." Edward looked at Amanda with a mixture of horror and disturbing comprehension. She had murdered Gabriel's aunt to protect him from a threat, only to become an even greater threat herself. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because," Amanda said, her handcuffs clinking as she leaned forward, "I learned something in prison I never knew before, what it's like to lose something you love. And I loved Gabriel, Edward, in a sick, possessive way, but I loved him. You tried to kill him. I tried to control him. I wanted him to depend only on me, to see me as indispensable. I never really intended to kill him. The other cases, they were different. But Gabriel was special." Edward realized he was listening to the confession of a deeply disturbed person who confused obsessive control with love. "Amanda, Gabriel is safe now. He has a family who truly loves him." "I know," she whispered. "And the girl, Maria. She did what I never had the courage to do when I was a child." "What do you mean?" "I was abused when I was little, Edward. No one protected me. No one believed me when I tried to ask for help. Maria was brave in a way I never could be." The revelation didn't justify Amanda's actions, but it offered a painful perspective on how cycles of trauma can perpetuate when there isn't adequate intervention. What do you want from me, Amanda? Just for you to know that Gabriel was never truly safe, not even before I appeared, and for you to protect him and Maria forever, because there are people in the world who see innocent children as obstacles to their goals. When Edward left the prison that afternoon, he carried the weight of complex truths about Gabriel's past. But he also carried a renewed determination to ensure his son grew up surrounded by genuine love and true protection. That night, watching Gabriel sleep peacefully in his crib, Edward whispered a solemn promise: "Never again, my son, never again will anyone threaten our family." The mansion that had been the scene of so many dangers now pulsed with the strength of a family that had survived the worst and emerged more united and determined than ever. A year had passed since that terrible afternoon when Maria ran to Edward with a bottle of shoe glue in her hands, forever changing a family's destiny. The mansion that once echoed with dark secrets now reverberated with children's laughter, joyful conversations, and the gentle music Connie hummed while tending to household chores with genuine love. Gabriel, now 1 year and 8 months old, took his first wobbly steps through the mansion garden, chasing butterflies with the stubborn determination characteristic of small children. His blue eyes sparkled with a vivid intelligence that had been suppressed during those months of poisoning, but which now blossomed freely under the care of a family who loved him unconditionally. "Daddy! Daddy!" Gabriel cried, running with outstretched arms toward Edward, who was returning from work at an earlier time that had become his new routine. Edward's absolute priority was no longer building a financial empire, but being present for every precious moment of his son's development. Maria, now 8 years old and attending the city's best private school, had developed a serene maturity that impressed everyone who knew her. She had become not only Gabriel's protective older sister, but also a small guardian of the family, who observed any new person with the keen instinct of someone who had prematurely learned that not all adults are trustworthy. "Uncle Edward," Maria said that afternoon, while helping Gabriel build a tower of colorful blocks, "my teacher at school asked if I want to join a special program for kids who want to help other children in difficult situations." Edward sat on the rug beside them, observing the seriousness with which Maria considered the proposal. "And what do you think, my brave one?" "I think so. If I could help Gabriel, maybe I can help other children too." Connie appeared at the living room door, drying her hands on the apron Edward had insisted on replacing with more elegant versions that matched her new position as the official household manager. Dinner's almost ready, and a special letter arrived for Maria. The letter was from the district attorney overseeing Amanda's case, informing that Maria's courageous testimony had been instrumental in connecting Amanda to other crimes, resulting in the liberation of 3 men who had been falsely accused of poisoning their own children in previous cases. "Maria," Edward said, after reading the letter aloud, "you not only saved Gabriel's life, but you also helped bring justice to other families who were suffering unjustly." Maria's eyes filled with tears of emotion. "Other children are safe now. Other children are safe now," Edward confirmed, hugging her tenderly. During dinner, the family shared the day's events with the naturalness of people who had learned to cherish every moment together. Gabriel babbled happily in his high chair, trying to imitate the adults' words, while Maria talked about her school projects and Connie planned aloud the improvements she wanted to make in the garden. "You know," Edward said, observing his family around the table, "and sometimes I think people like Amanda come into our lives to teach us important lessons about what really matters." "What kind of lessons, Uncle?" Maria asked. "That true strength doesn't come from money or power, but from the courage to protect those we love. That the most important voices aren't always the loudest, but sometimes they are courageous whispers from children who see the truth when adults are blinded by overtrust." Edward paused, looking at Gabriel, who was happily playing with fruit pieces on his tray. And that family isn't defined by blood or documents, but by people willing to risk everything for each other. Later that night, after Maria and Gabriel fell asleep, Edward sat in his office and wrote in a journal he had started keeping since the nightmare ended. "Dear Gabriel," he wrote, "one day, when you're old enough to understand, I'll tell you about the brave girl who saved your life and about how we learned that the biggest threats sometimes come disguised as salvation. I'll teach you to listen to the small voices that whisper important truths and to trust your instincts even when everyone around you seems convinced otherwise." Edward paused, writing for a moment, looking out the window at the garden where Maria had played with Gabriel that afternoon. "You'll grow up knowing you had a sister who risked everything to protect you, a grandmother figure who loves you as if you were her own flesh and blood, and a father who learned that being protective means always being vigilant, but never paranoid." The next morning, Edward woke to the sound of laughter coming from the garden. Through the window, he saw Maria teaching Gabriel to walk among the flowers she and Connie had planted together. The sun shone on the scene, creating an image of family perfection that sharply contrasted with the shadows that had haunted that same house just a year before. Connie appeared beside Edward at the window, observing the two children she had gained through the most improbable circumstances. "Mr. Miller," she said softly, "do you think we really did it?" "Did what, Connie?" "Transform a house that was the scene of so much evil into a home filled with true love." Edward smiled, watching Gabriel take wobbling steps toward Maria, who awaited him with open arms and an encouraging smile. "Not only did we do it, Connie, we created something stronger than common love. We created a family forged by overcoming, tempered by adversity, and united by the certainty that we will always protect each other." And so, as the sun rose over the mansion that had been transformed from a scene of terror into a sanctuary of family love, Edward understood that the greatest victories in life don't come from professional achievements or accumulation of wealth, but from the ability to recognize and protect true treasures. The brave people who risk everything to save those they love, and the invincible strength of a family that learned that genuine love means always being ready to fight for the safety of those who matter most. The golden morning bathed the family, who had discovered that, sometimes, the happiest endings are born from the most terrifying beginnings, and that the courage of a small child can save not only a life, but completely rebuild the meaning of home, family, and true protection.